Welcome to our presentation about no1s1, a blockchain-based DAO prototype for autonomous space. I'm Jens Hunhevicz, Chair of Innovative and Industrial Construction at ETH Zurich, and I wrote this paper together with Hongyang Wang and Daniel Hall, also from ETH Zurich, and Lukas Hess from Dezentrum. The idea of no1s1 is based on blockchain. Blockchain are decentralized peer-to-peer networks for value transactions not controlled by any single entity. This is facilitated by consensus mechanisms, in essence code, that creates coordination rules to incentivize participants towards collaboration. In the case of Bitcoin, the first ever blockchain created, they incentivize participants, honest participants with Bitcoin. And with that, they create a very resilient and secure financial network without the need to trust any intermediaries. So at its core, blockchains facilitate new forms of coordination. Scholars recognize this in various publications. They state blockchain is a facilitator for new types of economic organization and governance, and therefore an institutional innovation with the potential to disrupt and substitute existing economic coordination. Our idea of no1s1 exactly builds upon this idea that blockchain can facilitate new forms of governance. I need to introduce now two concepts associated with that. The first one is Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, or DAOs. DAOs are organizations solely governed by rules defined in smart contracts. Smart contracts are scripts where you can encode logic to interact with transactions in the blockchain network. So if something happens, then do that. So with that, DAOs enable new forms of decentralized bottom-up coordination. And this not only between humans, but also between humans and machines. Because blockchain is an address-based system, it doesn't distinguish between who holds the address. So also things can hold addresses and transact with other parties in the network. And the idea that then smart contracts can code collaboration mechanisms between humans and machines with the purpose to sustain these things is quite exciting and could create non-rent-seeking, self-sustaining infrastructure and things. So it's this idea of self-owning things. McConaughey describes this as nature to zero. Things just are while they simply provide. As an analogy, he uses a forest. He says the forest just is, it provides. And with blockchain, now it's possible to also create infrastructure that just is and provides its service. Of course, it's possible to add a layer of ownership on top, but at its core, ownership is not needed anymore. Things could just own itself. So DAOs and self-ownership of things that comes along with it are very interesting new concepts. And we ask ourselves the question, how this might impact how physical space will be built, owned, and operated in the future. So this paper offers a starting point to conceptualize what we call Decentralized Autonomous Space, DAOs, and showcase feasibility of DAOs with our prototype no1s1. So let's start with the concept of decentralized autonomous space, physical space governed through a DAO. In the paper, you find this preliminary conceptualization of DAOs. So there are different areas. Let me walk you through these. So on the one hand, creation autonomy. So the DAOs could facilitate its own design and construction. Once the space is built or exists, then we go into management autonomy. So the DAO somehow needs to manage and coordinate finances of the space. So store funds, have revenue mechanisms to sustain itself, and be able to spend funds. Then it needs to be operation autonomous in the sense that the DAOs needs to be able to interact with the technical systems of the space and also the human that use the space. And finally, maintenance autonomy. Space exists normally for quite a while, so there need to be mechanisms in place that detect faults and things that need to be done. and also have mechanisms in place that then define tasks and hire workers to execute the tasks. Since physical space in the built environment is a very human-centric system, physical space in the built environment only exists because we as humans want to use it. Also, this will also not change for DAOs. So human interaction is very important. There might be different interest group of humans, for example, investors, owners, users, most importantly, and maybe contractors that work for the DAOs. So for no1s1, we had then to think about where to start implementing for our first prototype. We decided that we start with the management autonomy side and created finance mechanisms to store funds and revenue mechanisms to earn money, or the DAOs can earn money. For now, there are no expenditure mechanisms, so the DAOs gets richer and richer. From an operational tech standpoint, we created through IoT the possibility that the DAOs can steer some of the technical systems and also has mechanisms for human interaction through a front end where the users can use, or through interaction design, so something happens in the space that humans can see and so know what the space wants. And from a human group perspective, we only considered users. So the no1s1 prototype has its origin in a think tank called Dezentrum, located in Zurich. We started collaborating with Dezentrum through a master thesis led by Hongyang Wang. She built the prototype together with our group, so credits to her for most of the work that you see now. no1s1 is a solar-powered single-user self-owning meditation space. It's solar-powered because it needs to sustain itself. It's quite small because we want to have it mobile and lightweight to move it around. So it's only for one single user, and it's self-owning in the sense that it owns its own funds. Why a meditation space? Because as a minimum viable prototype, we needed something that has a very minimized functionality and also is easy to maintain. So a meditation space is perfect for that. And the concept is very aligned with the concept of sharing economy. So everyone can use it, but no one needs to own it. So it's very aligned with that. So how did we implement it? In the paper, you find this figure, which shows the technical system interactions. I broke this diagram down into several slides for simplicity in this presentation. So no1s1 is a cyber-physical system. On the right side, we have the physical world with no1s1, the users, and the electrical systems. And on the left side, we have the cyber world with the blockchain, the distributed ledger technology, where the DAOs lives, and a front end so users can interact with the DAOs through their browser. So to facilitate then DAOs, we identified two important feedback loops that need to work. The first one is as follows. So users directly triggered something in the DAOs transactions defined through by the smart contracts. So they access the front end and sign transactions with their blockchain wallet. This triggers certain actions through smart contracts. That events get emitted, caught by the back end. The electronic or actions are triggered in the space and feedback back to the DAOs that this actually happened. And the users get notified again in the front end. One example for such a feedback loop is accessing the space. You can see in this video the user experience of using the first version of our prototype. We already have some newer mechanisms in place right now. There is also a new website, but we didn't have a video in place for this presentation. But the concept stays roughly the same. Users access the front end, they interact, they can check the status of the battery, if there is enough energy left, if the space is not occupied, and then they can pay for accessing the space. And if the transaction is successful, they receive a QR code that they can scan. The backend propagates this code back to the blockchains as is this code valid? The smart contract says yes, and triggers the unlocking the door, and the user can enter. So that's one example for such a mechanism. The second important feedback loop is directly from the space. So users might enter the space, or something else, some other activity happens in the space, and that is important for the DAOs to know. So the backend needs to propagate this information to the DLT. The smart contracts decide what to do, and back to the space trigger the activity in the electrical system. Of course, this can also be displayed in the front end, so the users know what's going on. This picture showcases the technology that we actually used for implementing no1s1. There is no time to go into details. In essence, there is a Raspberry Pi and Arduino that control the technical system with some sensors, a lock, some lights, and the solar system. And on the cyber world side, we use Ethereum as a blockchain where we coded smart contracts in Solidity. And we use Angular for the front end and MetaMask as a blockchain wallet that the users can use to interact with the DAOs. In the actual physical prototype, the technical system looks like this. It's quite messy. We're in the process of cleaning that up, but in a minimum viable prototype, I think technical systems need to look like that. So you have an impression how this actually looks like in practice. So let's conclude. Key takeaways. DAOs is a disruptive new conceptual idea for self-ownership of physical space. It has the potential to replace current organizational structures. So it's quite thought-provoking in that sense and exciting. Early prototyping is possible. We demonstrated this with our prototype no1s1. Of course, many limitations still apply. There is much more research needed to make this work in a real-world scenario. Nevertheless, it's quite exciting to see that the technology is around to do this. We use blockchain to manage funds and define governance rules for the DAOs. So it's really self-owned. No one can just steal the funds. No one can just change the rules without going through the processes defined in the DAOs. IoT bridges the world between blockchain and the physical world, so the DAOs can steer and control the physical space. And in our prototype or in our research, we focus very much on a governance process that is based on a human collective decision-making. So it's really the idea of a sharing economy without anyone actually owning the space. We are so far not really exploring AI to control the processes. It's all human based. There is many next steps. There is a list of questions in the paper that states open research questions we have regarding technical aspects, social technical aspects, or regulatory and legal aspects. We are still actively working on no1s1 and have more and more collaborators that explore various aspects of autonomous space. Finally, I need to thank Dezentrum and ETH Student Project House. They hosted construction or supported construction of the space, and EY and Digitec Galaxus that sponsored equipment and funds for making this happen. So thank you for listening. We have a short Q&A now where you can ask questions. Otherwise, you can contact me through email, or you can check no1s1.space. We try to update the site regularly. Thanks.